Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Terminus Extreme Metal Podcast. I am the death metal guy.
And I am the black metal guy.
And we are here to... Black metal guy, this is our first real episode of the year, and there's no extreme metal bands anywhere. What have we done?
Yeah, that's true. I guess we've gone back to the roots, to two figures that are very important to each of us,
near and dear to our hearts,
and both quite relevant to extreme metal in ways that we occasionally bring up on the show, but in different ways. And one of them gets mentioned, I think, in discussions both on our show and just in the general extreme metal sphere. One of these guys gets talked about a lot more than the other.
Yeah, that's fair, and probably like one is probably better liked at this point than the other.
Well, sure, yes, they have had very different legacies, and I think they have very different personal track records, which we'll either talk about at the end. I mean, it'll come up again and again throughout this, but like, there's the drama. We'll probably discuss at the end of the show, or at a after show live stream. I guess we should use their fucking names though. So basically, the death metal guy wanted to do a show on his goth metal icon, Pete Steele. And I said that's a great idea. But then as I thought about it more, I thought, well, if we're gonna cover your goth metal icon, Pete Steele, we clearly also need to cover my goth metal icon, Danzig.
And it also kind of worked out because we realized pretty quickly that there's these are artists who work in kind of delayed parallel with one another. With as the black metal guy pointed out, Peter Steele following Danzig's career closely in his footsteps, and it also ended up being a situation where it's two bands who sort of make the same album over and over again. So reviewing one kind of reviews the discography in a large sense.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to get at something representative about both of them for focusing on a certain album. But yeah, the Pete Steele Danzig connection is fascinating. So basically, everyone talks about, if you want to talk about guys from the broader metal and, I guess, alternative music world that get brought up in discussions of, say, extreme doom, death doom, funeral doom, maybe thrash metal or metalpunk, it would be Pete Steele, right? So whether you're talking about the later Type O records or Slow, Deep, and Hard and Carnivore, Pete Steele has really been grandfathered in as, our guy.
Oh yeah.
And as someone that everyone likes and that clearly had always had one foot in the underground metal scene, and where there are very clear parallels between the kind of music he makes and the kind of music we all listen to more regularly. And we hear his influence in certain things on this show that sound very far-flung from Type O. So, like, Ruins of Beverast, especially the later stuff, is highly influenced by Pete Steele. It's really fed back in... Type O Negative has really... was influenced by the earliest extreme doom, whether you're talking about, like, trad stuff like Candlemass, or I think the earliest stirrings of Funeral Doom, or something in between, like Cathedral or whatever. That's all in Type O. But it's fed back into a lot of extreme metal since then.
Yeah, I think that, I was sort of joking at the front of the show because it's like, on an extreme metal show, it seems very obvious to both of us why you would talk about Danzig and Type O Negative. perhaps not extreme metal themselves, but near and dear to the hearts of basically everybody into this music.
Yeah, so the person that comes up less is Danzig. Mm-hmm. I think Danzig has a bigger following in the punk scene and possibly also the regular heavy rock scene these days, which would probably include that weird niche of metal that you can be into without being into other metal, like Down and Pantera and all that, right? If you're like a Down t-shirt guy, you might well not be a punk, but also be really into Danzig.
Yeah.
You know, you could like Pantera, Down, Danzig, High on Fire, and also like whatever random death metal your buddy plays you in his truck.
Yeah.
And that's a completely coherent and legitimate kind of metal fan. We like talking to those guys in bars. It's just sort of its own thing.
Yeah, it's sort of what the groove metal guy evolved into.
Yes, and I think Danzig, as we'll get into, has an important ancestral relationship to that scene. Mm-hmm. The only people you really hear referencing Danzig in extreme metal are Marduk, where you can clearly hear the imprint of Misfits, especially in their later, more hardcore Misfits, in the later, more minimalist Marduk, starting in the Panzer Division, or also we've talked about the connection to Spite Extreme Wing over and over again. Mm-hmm. But there's not much direct connection to the Danzig solo material. And we'll get into why that is. This is interesting because in many ways, the persona, the character Danzig, which is really what we're talking about when we're talking about the music, the character Danzig is a black metal guy. A fully armed and operational second wave black metal guy, starting in the mid '80s.
He absolutely is. I mean, and looking at Danzig closer, you can also see sort of like I don't know, a sort of personal proximity to a very serious kind of like deliberately vexing art guy, there's not as much DNA difference between Danzig and Boyd Rice as a lot of us would like to imagine, I think.
No, Danzig was originally a art photography student.
Okay.
In Manhattan. Now, this is back when living in Manhattan was a good option for rent. But it's he was he was definitely came out of a kind of an early intersection of art world stuff with comic culture and underground music that has since prospered. But temperamentally in some ways Danzig is probably, although Danzig's music is more accessible, Danzig might be temperamentally closer to a hermetic black metal weirdo like von Meilenwald than Pete Steele is, even though Meilenwald is far more influenced by Pete Steele. Mm-hmm. Danzig has that sort of the artiste vibe that's in a lot of black metal under the surface.
Yeah, there's a crossover where Danzig is an extreme metal guy playing very heavy rock, and Pete Steele is like rock and roll god playing, pretty extreme doom a lot of the time.
That's a very good way of putting it. There's a chiasmus. It's an X. That's a very good point. So, now getting into that, the sort of the Steele-Danzig relationship. Yeah, basically, like the death metal guy already mentioned it, but when I was thinking about this episode, I was like, well, clearly Pete Steele was just extraordinarily influenced by Danzig. And that's interesting because in our spheres, people talk about Steele on his own. Mm-hmm. You don't often hear like, well, of course I love Type O Negative and Danzig. They're like paired bands in the same way that you might say, I like Satanic Warmaster and Sargeist.
Yeah.
Right? Or you could think of a better example of this. But like there's certain, actually Charlie Looker was talking about this in an interview I said, there's bands that come in pairs, right? You say I love Deth in June and Current 93, and you might have a favorite. You're almost always gonna have a favorite, but like you like them both.
Yes.
And in our spheres, I don't really think you get them mentioned in the same breath. And to me, it seems that they should be. And maybe that has something to do with the fact that in the early 90s, that like from our vantage point with distance, you can just look at Pete Steele and look at Danzig and be like, this is the same guy with some changes to proportions in the character creation screen. Right? It's right. You just take your Danzig and you say, I'm gonna make him 6'5", and then you go, it's
Oh man, just maxing out the dick slider.
yeah. Danzig just got back from Agartha. So it's, they're obviously the same guy, but in the early 90s, the market for, I guess, brooding, long-haired rocker guy was pretty saturated. So maybe it was kind of harder to tell apart back then, right? Or like harder to, rather, it looked more distinct, because whether you're talking about the mainstream or the underground, the market was flooded. So everyone is already this brooding, long-haired rocker guy. So you don't even think that these two are the exact same type of brooding, long-haired rocker guy, right? Down to, I mean, by the time we get mature Pete Steele style, he just looks like Danzig. He has the long hair and the pronounced, he has sideburns that are accentuated into mutton chops. They're not as fuzzy as Danzig, but it's basically the same thing. So there's this modeling, and the more I thought about it, the closer the imitation is, in a way where it stops looking like, let's say, a kind of strong but casual artistic influence, and starts to look like something more deliberate. And this is not meant as a criticism of Pete Steele at all. It, you know, at this point, how do I bridge this into the episode? At this point, let's just fucking get into it. So, basically, we found we had so much material here that, you know, we had some really good conversations about it, and I just built it out into more of an actual script for the show than we've had before, because we've got so much to wrangle. So that's pretty exciting on the one hand. It also means that I must warn you up front. There will be times when I basically do have paragraphs typed out here, and I am reading them, because improving just won't be... Like, it's not. It wouldn't be the same.
Why are you blowing up the spot? I do that shit all the time on the show.
No, I think we usually kind of do. We've talked about it before. It's good to show how you make it.
No, I'm fucking around.
Yeah. We have done it before, but this is a 15-page script with, you know, the other disclaimer would be that. This is not a rock biography show, right? If you've been listening to us for a long time, you understand that. But it's a, you know, our focus is always on analyzing the music itself and the genealogies, the histories of that music. And so we're not interested in we're not so much interested in Pete Steele the guy or Danzig the person as their lives as artists. And our primary document for those artistic lives is the music itself. So that's our focus. We're going to be listening to records and talking about that and extrapolating that from that. Where biography does come into it, it's where this somehow reinforces or adds nuance to what we're talking about in the art.
Yes, we're interested in people as artists, not really as guys.
Yes. So we did. So, like, these are two figures who are larger than life and have had very long careers that were very productive across multiple styles. Both doing stuff that was more extreme and aggressive, both doing stuff that was more sort of somber and gothic. They have real range, and they each have very devoted cult followings, with people who are really invested in them and everything they did or didn't do. Danzig even has an invested cult following of haters. Actually, Pete Steele does too. Or the sort of TikTok girls who can't get enough of their problematic bae. But
is that a thing going on with Pete Steele?
Oh yeah, they know they shouldn't, but they do.
Do they know he's dead? Do they know that he's been dead for a while now? He can't hurt anyone.
That just makes it harder.
Fair.
No, the whole point is that there's just like kinds of girls who normally wouldn't make excuses for a guy like that, making a lot of excuses for Pete Steele.
Gotcha.
So basically, there are people who know way more about the life of Pete Steele or the life of Danzig than either of us. That's never really been our jam in how we relate to these people. So if you know things we don't, please tell us, right? If we make mistakes here, that is interesting to us, and we can only learn from that. Maybe those mistakes ultimately fit in with what we're trying. Like, maybe you'll tell us the real fact, and it won't really change what we're saying here. Maybe it will, and that's okay. We'll develop it. And also, the other reason we did not do like real biographical research for this is that's kind of the point, is that what matters is the lore and mythos that's grown up around these guys and the albums, and it's the stuff that sticks because it shows us something about the music and it has some purchase on our imaginative visions of these characters.
Yes, I'm much more interested in the metaphysical truth of these men more than the factual truth.
Exactly. And, you can write a book where, you're very attentive to the relations between those two things and you can deepen your relationship of one through the other. That's fine, right? A really good biography does that. But, like, we are much more focused on we're much more focused on the aesthetic and metaphysical, like the death metal guy said. So, now we'll get into the substance of the argument, because this show really has an argument running through it. The episode is about heroism. And that means both the process of becoming a hero and having a hero. As both of these men became themselves. And it's also about the active construction of a persona and the process of becoming this larger than life figure. Our narrative arc for this argument is going to be Pete Steele's meticulous attention to Danzig's work and his response to Danzig over the course of his life, and how that response changes. So, as we're treating it here, Steele is the variable and Danzig is the constant. So really, in some ways, our whole setup is Danzig does this, Steele does this. Inevitably, what emerges more, Steele by default in some ways, he's the active character. So in some way, the story's about him. Although we could just as easily tell a story like that about Danzig in relation to his own artistic coming to be, right? And we will certainly get into the development of both of these artists, but it's really gonna be about how Steele has Danzig as his hero and then makes himself into a kind of hero that stands distinct from the Danzig figure. And so it's a show about the art of being influenced, or influence as systematic artistic method. Right? That is, Pete Steele is not passively absorbing Danzig's influence, right?
No, he's certainly. It's not a passive process. He's very active and engaged in analyzing what Danzig is doing, finding points of commonality, and also importantly, finding points of contrast.
Yes. So, yeah, basically, what we want to show is that it's possible for a musician to have a massive and overriding influence on from another artist, right, as Steele does from Danzig, while also developing a distinct voice. And there's kind of a well-established path for doing this. And in this, and it happens across all sorts of artistic mediums, and probably in other things that aren't strictly art, like history and politics, right? But how does this happen? The artist makes himself into the apprentice of a master. All right, that doesn't mean he's enslaved to Danzig. That's a different album by Satagua. But it means sexually enslaved to Master Danzig would be the great name of a grindcore record.
Well, I was gonna say if you go to see the Misfits comeback these days, you're sort of in a Findom relationship, but Danzig's not a part of that. So
yeah. Will they even play a set? Ooh, they didn't play tonight. Oh, 450
yes.
down the drain. Oh,
You're teasing me. I'm getting edged. I'm getting.
Your joy seeps out through your cut off cargo shorts. You sort of get weak at the knees and you fall over, spilling your $15 bottle of water. Now that we've gotten over the silly associations of that word and had a good chuckle about it, we can start using it in the way it's used in art criticism. So basically, right, we're talking about the master-apprentice relationship. It doesn't even mean Danzig is a better artist than Steele, and Steele is his little, echo or something. That's not what we mean. It's a master and an apprentice.
Yeah, it's a chain of artistic influence.
Yeah, artistic transmission. Mm-hmm. And so, how does this work? Well, you've already said it's about finding common ground and also points of departure, right? So, and part of that is it's not just about imitating somebody's outward style. You can be a painter who makes paintings that look kind of like, Cezanne paintings or Salvador Dali paintings, and not do anything that either of those guys did, right? Mm-hmm. Right. Rather, the idea, and we've talked about this with music a lot, right? What really makes good being influenced is that you're working to understand what makes the master's art work. So that means the principles of organization that work from the level of an individual riff all the way up to all the way up to how one organizes an album or a career. The habits of composition. What is he inclined to do when he's writing? Mm-hmm. What are his preferences and little whims? How does that make him distinct? How might that make him seem in some ways limited? Right? And so as Steele is doing this, right, basically and let's say explicitly what he's doing. He is methodically imitating every step of, methodically sort of almost ritually retracing the path of Danzig through every step in Danzig's career. Mm-hmm. In every step of Steele's career matches to a preceding step in Danzig's. And as he's doing this, he's interested in the aesthetic value system of Danzig, the processes through which Danzig seems to make stuff, the methods for doing things. I keep using the word method over and over again, right?
Well, but it's appropriate because, like, mm-hmm. Steele's biggest interest in Danzig is I would say that the aesthetic nods that Steele very deliberately gives to Danzig are sort of a fun tribute for himself. What he's most interested in is, like, as you said, methods and processes, ideas of organization, and beyond that, what the character of Danzig represents, beyond merely a style or an aesthetic, the sort of cultural significance, or if we want to go, like, really crazy with it, sort of like the metaphysical figure of Danzig.
Yeah, Danzig is a guy who, I mean, we can talk about this more later, but Danzig seems to have created his own artistic persona in a different way, by what you could call the method of the heroic mask, which I talk about, if people are interested in that, I talk about more in my very old Pregnant Light sort of essay and interview. But, like, Danzig seems to maybe not have had one particular master figure, but to have reached for something more epic and mythical, and put on that mask deliberately. And through it, he's created this persona that is not just Danzig the guy, but is Danzig the figure. And now Steele is responding to Danzig the heroic figure, as well as perhaps ways that Danzig the heroic figure doesn't quite line up with Danzig the guy. So basically, in this method of ritual imitation, there's a kind of humility, right? He's saying I'm going to take on this person as my master and try to figure out what makes his work tick. It's a kind of affirmation of fate, a voluntary surrender of freedom. And through that, it opens up possibilities, right? This means that instead of being just an artist who has this nebulous swarm of things called influences, you have a concrete model. That's another word we'll use a lot. In addition to method, model. So it's not just things you like or things that are acting on you artistically without you realizing it. Right? Like the person who writes a book that they think is really original and, well, they've just accidentally rewritten Star Wars or whatever, right? Basically, Steele takes this process so seriously that he's modeling himself on Danzig in basically everything, and the good thing about a model, the crucial thing, I guess this is what I wanted to get to, having a model makes it easier to maintain a certain distance from your influences. If your influence is out there in front of you as the master, he isn't you, right? It doesn't become like part of your personality in the same way. So we can all think of examples of people who experience music as, we all do this to some extent, right, with music, and it's important, right, that it becomes a part of you. But here's a good example of sort of being influenced in a way that's different. I love Slavic black metal. Everything about Slavic black metal is good and is inseparable from me. I listen to Slavic black metal. I like Slavic black metal. I'm making a Slavic black metal band. This person does not have any critical distance from the things he listens to, and hasn't even really sort of separated those parts out into different, into distinct entities.
Yeah,
right? This person, of course, is not me.
Well, I think perhaps a way to phrase this is that the student is not merely the biggest fan.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Yes.
Yeah, merely, which is why you it also explains the phenomena of, like, black metal kids who know everything about every tape you've ever heard of, but don't really seem to fucking, like, get it.
For sure. And also, yes, the biggest fan, yeah, absolutely. And I think you can even be a big fan who basically gets it and still not have that kind of fully articulated understanding of what makes the guy tick. Or the guy's work tick. So he's so if the master is a model who is out there in front of you, it means it means you can ask critical questions. As a son quarrels with his father, as Lucifer quarrels with God, right? You can quarrel with your master.
Oh man, I want the edit of Steele as Lucifer in that painting with a single tear in his eye.
Yes. I mean, in some ways, all of the solo Danzig lyrics are about Lucifer quarreling with God, right? So then you've got fucking Steele quarreling with Danzig. And, yeah. Oh man, you could do this we could Photoshop this with the Danzig wings photo. Have you seen that one where he's wearing like Icarus wings?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Other thing. As we're talking about this sort of this notion of methodical imitation, because someone will point it out in the comments, and also because it is, an important work that's worth citing, there is a book about this. Mm-hmm. And this is Harold Bloom's sort of masterful work of literary criticism, The Anxiety of Influence, from 1973. So, basically, Bloom really focuses on this relationship of poetic student to poetic master. And he characterizes it as an agon, which is a heroic struggle. That's a term that comes from Greek epic in particular. It's something we occasionally use it on this show. And it's a struggle that, and this is a struggle that bears fruit, right? So Bloom characterizes it as a struggle of student and master, and he sees it as essential to the production of great literature. And he talks about how, say somebody like, somebody like Wordsworth to Milton or something. There might be I actually can't even remember if this is one of his examples, but, there's basically, the student in his drive to produce original work ends up in a kind of Oedipal revolt against the master, and often ends up concealing the influence of the master in a strategic way. And Bloom would argue that this Oedipal revolt and this strategic concealment, which is unconscious often, isn't a drawback. It's kind of necessary to presenting work that really stands apart from the work that influenced it. Now, this approach, the reason I didn't use these concepts up front is that this particular approach to it is a bit too anxious for us. Mm-hmm. Right? This is steeped in the language of post-war psychoanalysis and even a little bit of dialectics.
I will jump in just to say, because when I saw you were mentioning this, I think my take on the anxiety of influence is that it's probably quite correct for a very narrow band of cultural process, namely stuff that is aspiring toward a kind of classical greatness. But I think that it breaks down in other forms of art, like, as you'll undoubtedly get to, heavy metal, which functions within genre a bit more definitively and is not ashamed about that.
Yeah, and I think even in these great artists, I'm not sure it's fair to describe the process as one of sort of an Oedipal tantrum against the overpowering figure of the master, a kind of an individual slave revolt, or as this kind of covert thing, this concealment, right? I think it's it takes this whole process, which can be a grand and beautiful one, and makes it a kind of fraught and anxious. It makes it neurotic, so I think it's one very famous work. I mean, undoubtedly, it's a book worth reading. Have I read it? Actually, no.
Neither have I. It's fine.
Yeah, but it's still worth mentioning, right? And it's whatever little criticisms I'm launching at it, that's a criticism of the inflection it brings to its subject matter, rather than to the things, to the actual analysis that happens there, which in a work like that is always worthwhile. So he goes through a whole typology of how there's some of these different master-student relationships work, and many of them seem very apt. Mm-hmm. So the real difference, is, I guess the other thing that makes it different is his work is driven by this notion of, the modern notion of the original, right? Which we've talked about as a thing that metal, and also even a lot of the modern art that we really value, enormement rejects. Right? And you can see that especially in extreme metal, right? In metal, we are proud of our influences, and part of our goal is to carry on their legacies. Metal is about the transmission of an artistic tradition. The great modernist poets were proud of their influences very clearly. But what a guy like Bloom does capture, and we have to give him credit, is that the greatest artists tend to approach influence in this deliberate and methodical way. And that the relationship between the apprentice and master is two-sided. The student must struggle to distinguish himself, and if he doesn't, he will always remain, a capable member of Rembrandt's school, right? Rather than an artist with a formidable voice in his own right. Right? You will, and in metal, we see that in terms of very good genre exercise bands.
Yeah.
Right? The best example, I mean, not even genre exercise, the best example would be you've got to hear this killer new Ildjarn clone.
Yeah.
Right? And it might actually be a killer Ildjarn clone, but all you can say is, if you really like Ildjarn and you need some more Ildjarn tracks, listen to this.
Mm-hmm. And there's a place for those for our pet musical obsessions. I'll listen to every Forest clone. But it's definitely not aspiring toward the sort of things that Bloom is talking about.
Yes. So so in this we're taking more of a sort of a traditionalist approach to understanding this heroic struggle of student and master, and how from that struggle Pete Steele generates his music and his own larger-than-life persona.
My tongue hanging south, saliva flowing free. My eyes full of lust, my balls gonna bust. Give yourself to me, thirst I can't quench. Come here, you wench, there's something I need. I'm a meat eater. I'd like to meet ya. I know I'll reach ya. The hunger I feel makes you a meal. Oh girl, you shall taste sweet. By my hair, pull me there. Guide me to your treat. Spread your legs, I'll send your eggs Oh, feel me deep. I'm a millionaire. I'd like to meet ya. I know I'll reach ya. Ooh, I'd love to eat ya. I'm going down. Dive, dive.
So, we were just talking about how Pete Steele makes imitation of Danzig into a kind of long-term ritual running throughout his life, or at least throughout the formative part of his career, where he built his own sound and vision. And that process takes us all the way back to, the relationship of these two figures whose reputations are now outside extreme metal takes us back to the very origin point of extreme music in general, which is really in the collision between punk and metal in the early 80s, arguably late 70s, but that time. And in step one, we have first Danzig and then Steele working in the vernacular of like thrashing hardcore. Why did I say working in the vernacular of?
Playing thrashing
hardcore. Playing thrashing hardcore. A guy writes some notes and all of a sudden he's like a fucking,
You're slipping back into that diction, man. Don't let it catch you.
I gotta slip the diction back in. Speaking of which, December 1982, the Misfits finish a big show in Santa Monica, California, and immediately go into the studio, presumably hopped up on some accelerants. They record from midnight to 6 a.m., so that is in magic terms, or in terms of like ancient Norse magic, that's utiseta, sitting out the night as a way of doing magic. They play through the night, and they end up with this crazy recording. Danzig is sitting on the couch. He wakes up once to record the vocals for to record the funny part for "Mommy, Can I Go Out and Kill Tonight?" When he hears what they recorded, he's fucking pissed. He hates it because the only brothers and the rest of the band were yacked out of their minds, and took tracks that Danzig had meant to go at a kind of like steady grooving Motorhead Venom tempo and recorded them at the tempo of what would become like Slayer thrash metal. And that record ends up becoming Earth AD, and it's a masterpiece, and to me, by far, the greatest Misfits record. It has a big influence on music we've covered on this show, which we'll talk about in a minute. And it's a landmark of extreme music and all that. And so after they record the material that becomes the Earth AD Wolf's Blood album, in October, end of October that year, they play their Halloween show in Detroit. And then they break up. And so before the album comes out, the Misfits are no more. They have self-destructed. They hate each other too much to continue. But they have left us with this artifact of crushing metallic hardcore. And so I think it comes out in Germany in October, funnily enough, but in the US it's not till December. So we get the Earth AD Wolf's Blood album, which is really sort of a collection of 2 recordings. And from 2 recordings from this period. So on this show before, we've actually sampled a couple times one song from this record, which you know which one, right?
No, not off the top of my head. I can't remember.
Devil Lock!
Well, yeah.
Devil Lock!
I don't know what song belongs on what album, so...
So that... We've talked about the importance of that riff, just that, basically pedal point thrash on the root note up to the minor third, and then that descent at the end from like the minor 6 down to the minor third, just like these the strongest intervals possible, broad, crashing down, dark but noble. And we've covered the Spite Extreme Wing cover of that song on the Spite Extreme Wing episodes. We've talked about how Spite Extreme Wing took this era of Misfits and almost made it into their whole band, their whole sound, especially on Non-Duke or Duco. And we've, I think it's well known at this point how this era of Misfits influences Metallica and Slayer and all of that. It is certainly the heaviest thing to come out of 80s hardcore, out of the main 80s hardcore bands after Discharge. So we've talked about that sort of like the really up-tempo stuff. I wanted to go a little, since we've already talked a lot about that, and as I just reminded everyone, let's go a little offbeat for a sample from this record. We're going to listen to the title track of the other part of the recording, Wolf's Blood.
Danzig sounds very annoyed just being there. Like like that story you tell about like how fast Eric, you can tell that he's like fucking irritated that he's not getting to do what he wanted with these songs vocally.
Yeah. Well, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah, you could always hear him chasing them around the studio.
like a chase scene in Scooby-Doo.
yeah, like But, I mean, this song, so it's technically not as fast as some of these other songs on the record, right? You notice that this is actually kind of a half-time D-beat in the style of some of the more, more of Venom and Motorhead, than like the full-on 1-2 Slayer beat stuff on some of the rest of the record. It actually has more of a slower D-beat. But this song feels like a fucking explosion. The guitar tone is crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, it's got black metal production.
Yes, but like really like not stereotypical either, because the guitars really open up and blare.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a really good black metal. It's like not encumbered by Norwegian doctrine. But yeah, you hear how pissed he is. And you hear those metal intervals, right? That's not like spazzy hardcore playing. That's just like that becomes Impaled Nazarene. Dum, 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 bum, 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 bum. It sounds like this song sounds like Danzig has already won and is standing on the bodies of his enemies, possibly the rest of the band, just sort of like punching them into a pulp. Right? People say they like triumphant black metal. This is triumphant black metal. There's footage of Danzig just like on stage at one of these late shows, just attacking the members of the audience in the front row, like literally punching down at them. That's what this sounds like. This is just like, and it comes late on the record as a kind of like climatic explosion. So interesting case of a song that sort of feels mid-tempo, that is technically slower and yet has this surging, cresting energy throughout, and they kind of like release and then tighten it up a bit and then release again in interesting ways. So that is that's another side of the Wolf's Blood split. We're focusing on Danzig here, but like you have to, in this case, you got to give a lot of credit to the other members of the band. I mean, talk about a productive Aegon, right? Danzig and the Only Brothers just hating each other's guts. In this case, produced their best record. Yeah, you could almost rewrite the song with the lyrics like, "Oh, you fucking ruined it, you motherfucker! You played that song too fast." You know, it's but the other thing is that Danzig rises to the occasion, right? He's like, okay, they made this like crazy, to him, this kind of like spazzy speed freak music. He's like, okay, I have to match this energy.
Yeah.
And so there you have that. Okay, so that's in later 83. So January 1984, just after that by like 1 or 3 months, a new band in New York City called Disciple changes its name to Carnivore!
Yes!
And they play their first gig in the April of that year with a striking and signature stage presence. The Metal Archives list this as fur, camouflage, shoulder pads, bones, grenades, and 8-inch spikes.
Very, very fully realized extreme metal aesthetic well before black metal guys would do it.
Yes, yeah, I mean, that's just like goat penis, right?
Yeah, I was about to say, it's not even like second wave black metal, it's like really cool trench coat shit.
yeah, like fucking, 90s bestial war metal.
Yes.
South America, Cogumelu thrash. It is total maniac, like fucking sadistic execution.
Yeah.
And of course, a lot of these guys almost certainly listened to Carnivore.
Yes.
Especially the Australians. I mean, Destroyer 666 is probably more
that's a great comparison, actually. There's a ton of Carnivore in that band's DNA. I think that, as an aside, I think that Carnivore in general is, like, not spoken of enough. Simply because the legacy is so eclipsed by Type O Negative. But those two records are really outstanding. And actually, just on a lark, I had never listened to Carnivore's first demo before, Nuclear Warriors from 1984. And it is, I gotta say, like, the band is fully realized from the first demo. Like, it is, it's really a complete EP, is what I would call it. And it really has much more to do with Type O Negative than you would expect. It's, two quite long tracks with, the self-titled track as kind of the hardcore number between them. And the level of heaviness is at least around Show No Mercy. So it's quite extreme for its time also.
Would it be worth sampling instead of the thing I had planned to sample for this?
No, I think that yours is going to be more representative, because let's talk about things people heard, but
right.
Maybe
that's a good point.
Maybe I'll throw one in as like an interlude or something.
Well, yeah, we have plenty of room for that. So I guess maybe before we already talked a little bit about the image stuff. Maybe we should get to the musical sample first, since we just played Wolf's Blood and we can put them next to each other.
Let's do a direct comparison.
All right, cool. I'm gonna cut and paste. If you're not already cut and pasting, I'm gonna move it up in the script.
Yeah, that's fine.
Basically, this is what Carnivore sounds like. This is Predator, the first. It starts with two tracks with almost identical titles, which is hilarious.
Yes, it is Predator first and then Carnivore.
Yes. So this is the first track on their on their first record in '85.
Damn, I really need to listen to that band more.
So, you know what? There's another that has the same sense of down-punching triumph that you hear it on Wolf's Blood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The comparison's very immediate.
Yeah. They both move at that kind of slowed down, thugged out D-beat Motorhead rhythm. This is obviously more with like filled in double bass. You can hear those, crashing descending chords in scowling Aeolian intervals in a way that's a little bit different from the bluesy sound, that's similar to the Misfits track and different from the bluesy sound of a lot of Motorhead or Venom. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's Venom is important to mention here. Like, Carnivore is almost certainly much more influenced by Venom on every level than they are by the Misfits proper. But this is certainly much closer. This is certainly a metalpunk record. It is deeply influenced by hardcore, and that hardcore influence is coming from the Misfits in the U.S. and probably Discharge in the UK.
Yeah, and honestly, using the term metal punk, this is kind of directly comparable to, like, a very cleaned up Jism or something.
Yes! Wait, did I write that in the notes? I was going to leave that as a surprise.
Oh, I don't think you did, but it seems...
Fucking nailed it! Yes! It is. Jism sounds so much like this. They are both more influenced by Venom than the bands you would expect them to be influenced by. And they both pick up on the kind of like noise metal aspect of Venom, which is maybe the coolest part.
Mm-hmm. So as a slight aside, I just want to get this in here before I forget. I was trying to consider bands from around the same era that parallel this. And what I landed on, which I hadn't, it had never occurred to me previously, but it just like hit me in the head, that really one of the most comparable things to Carnivore is Gwar, who also were clearly heavily influenced by the Misfits and Danzig's various projects over the years. But if Carnivore and those guys are coming out of a metal background, the Gwar guys are coming out of like kind of an art punk background. They're adopting all the theatrics, but then the funny thing is Gwar, at the very beginning of their career are effectively a punk band who, over the course of time, turn into a theatrical, full-fledged, like, thrashing heavy metal band over the course of their career.
It's Carnivore are metal guys, obviously, who are reaching towards hardcore for influence, and then Gwar are punk guys who are ironically metal and then become less and less ironic.
Yeah, and then it's just completely unironic after a while.
Ironic porn viewing leads to unironic ejaculation.
Best Onion article.
Yep.
That was it was a zombie-themed porno, too, so...
Of course it was. Undisputed Onion champion. So they, So yes, Gwar is a great parallel, and also, Carnivore doesn't sound like, quote, normal thrash metal, in the same way that Venom or Jism or D666 doesn't sound like normal thrash metal, which is also not that far from the way something like Gwar doesn't really sound like thrash metal.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to think that the sort of off-metal quality of Gwar is actually related to an ancestry in true sort of weirdo outsider metal in the 80s.
Yeah, like
right. You might think that Gwar's not really sounding like metal in certain ways is a fact that they're outsiders to the scene, and then they became this sort of stage show focused pop band. But it's actually moving. It has some of these characteristics because it's related to very authentic, kind of alternate history metal punk stuff in the 80s.
Yeah, like, it's difficult to remember that, the development of, like, NWO BHM to death metal is, like, 7 years. It's you have to keep in mind that all of these things are much more in contact with one another, even though, like, from a historical perspective, we kind of like cloister them off into their individual scenes. But the reality is that early death metal bands are running headlong into bands still playing in, like, the NWO BHM tradition. So it results in all these sort of bizarre melanges that end up being evolutionary dead ends, but are really cool to go back and listen to. And for stuff like Carnivore, I'd be like, there's no reason we can't just keep making bands like this. This is great.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I think a lot of that stuff isn't actually a dead end. It sounds like it when you compare it to the normal narrative we have of how these things were supposed to have developed. So another band that belongs in that story, and this will bring us back to the central narrative, is Carnivore's comrades in New York, Cro-Mags.
Mm-hmm.
Carnivore, the interesting thing is Carnivore were not influenced by the NYHC scene. They were essentially part of it, right? They were its metal liaisons. The metal... The sort of the more metal side of the NYHC scene was Carnivore. They were playing at exactly the same time. In fact, Age of Quarrel comes out... Well, it was delayed a little bit, but it comes out well after the Carnivore ST. Carnivore ST is late 85.
Yep.
So they're just part of that scene. They're playing... They're hanging out with Cro-Mags. Pete Steele is hanging out with Agnostic Front, which we'll get into later. Hilarity ensues.
I actually I don't know this lore. I saw that in your notes. I'm like, what is this?
so they are as much influencing, I think, these other bands as being influenced by them. But a record that really bears the marks of that kind of NWO BHM metal punk that lasts way longer than you think it should is the second Cro-Mags record that's just Harley Cro-Mags. What is that? I'm not going to remember the name off the top of my head, but it's the second Cro-Mags record from like very late 80s or early 90s. It's an awesome album, and Harley is still responding to Motorhead and like, on it. It's like it's at the same time as Integrity, and it's completely different interpretation of those things. So that's the milieu Carnivore exists in. But we should talk about the image more. I guess we sort of already did, but important things to stress also. Their gimmick was that they were post-apocalyptic wasteland raiders who ate human flesh and abducted women.
Sick.
Yep. And so that's obviously influenced by, Road Warrior and Escape from New York and all of these sort of 80s punk cinema, late 70s, early 80s punk movies. But it's, as we were talking about Gwar too and Venom, basically what Carnivore was doing, cultivating a unified theatrical image, was frowned upon in American hardcore and thrash. Like, extremely, right? The hardcore bands even thought Discharge was too theatrical. Discharge mercilessly mogged them at every turn. There was only one band in American hardcore that anticipated this, and that was, of course, the Misfits. Yeah. Who had a unified theatrical image. They had a stage show, and the costuming was meant to amplify and add to the atmosphere of the music. Right? When Misfits went on stage, they were, zombies who, instead of post-apocalyptic wasteland raiders, they were zombies who ate human flesh and abducted women. It's it's the same thing. So and this is something that the Misfits have much more in common with metal. It's part of that crossover on Earth AD. And so so Carnivore were drawing on the one hand from this sort of renegade hardcore sound that the Misfits had, and on the other hand, from clearly Manowar, right? Like,
yeah. Well, yeah.
Manowar is.
Well, it's funny because Carnivore is very ahead of the curve in like the tongue-in-cheek portrayal of the hypermasculinity that Manowar delivered with a completely straight face.
You think Carnivore was tongue-in-cheek? I think it was straight-faced.
I think. Well, okay. So
I think they knew it was funny, but I think they knew it was funny, but they thought it was cool.
Well, no, in the same way that we do. I think that we think that there's shit that is like very silly and simultaneously awesome. I think that. I guess after seeing Manowar live multiple times, you must kind of, You have to develop a sense of irony by watching them. Well, I think that Steele was very ahead of the curve in terms of like how he perceived a lot of this stuff. And I mean, obviously that bears out very clearly in Type O Negative, but I think that whole aspect of his creative output is like very personal to him. This kind of playing around with shit that is like very cool and also like deliberately silly, hyperbolized to the point of absurdity, and just sort of indulging in it. Yeah.
No, you're right. That is different from Manowar. It is different from Venom, even, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah. Okay, that's fair. There's always been some self-awareness to this.
He's the first hipster.
Well, that's the thing. It's different from hipster, because by the same token, he completely means it. Mm-hmm. But he's able to have a laugh. That's a thing that will come up again and again in the difference between them, is that Danzig originally has a sense of humor. And over time, I'm sure that Danzig the guy, if you were hanging out with him in a good mood, he was in a good mood. Danzig the guy is probably funny.
Yeah.
But, like, Danzig, the character, became... Danzig increasingly decided from... You can hear it already in Earth AD. The difference between Earth AD, which is basically about the substance of... Earth AD is like a pagan black metal album about, like, turning into a werewolf and shit, right? It's just... It's a Satanist... It's a Satanist or pagan album already. That it becomes sort of ideological in a way that, like, early Misfits is not. Right? This sort of the camp horror comic book stuff goes away for the most part by then. And that process only accelerates over the rest of his career to the point where, like, Danzig gets himself in trouble sometimes for his lack of sense of humor and lack of perspective. That has never been Pete Steele's problem. So yeah, Carnivore. I see what you mean. Carnivore is funny, and is influenced by Manowar. It's awesome to think that, like, Pete Steele probably saw Manowar like 30 times in, like, shitty lower Manhattan theaters filled with smoke and, like, people, like, fucking and dying. It's awesome. Yeah, so you were talking about Gwar as part of this legacy. I mean, I think the other bands we need to footnote for this would be The Accused from Seattle, who were so late in the 80s that they were seen as irrelevant and silly because they had a theatrical horror image and played this kind of protean metal punk. And, of course, one of your favorites, Vaughn.
Yes.
Who the music is just you take Earth AD and you make all the notes worse.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And you just make the most horrible. You take the epic heavy metal intervals on Earth AD and you turn it into horrible chromatics. And you take the costumes and instead of zombies, they are like I don't know, something else.
Cute guys from Hawaii, I guess.
Well, speaking of cute guys from Hawaii, do you want to take a break, or should we go on to this next little section?
Let's keep these together.
All right. So,
where were you going with cute guys? Okay, no, go ahead.
It was just funny. It was a funny phrase that sort of opened.
Well, no, if you actually see some of the old Vaughn live footage, they're like, these guys are fucking gorgeous. What are they doing playing this music?
I see. Okay, so we can't keep riffing on that. Okay, so basically, back to Pete Steele and Danzig.
So while
we get to the second stage,
we get to the next incarnation for Danzig.
Yes. If stage 1 is thrashing, metallic hardcore, metal punk, whatever, where they are developing this sort of fully committed theatrical presence. Step 2 is weird transitional albums. Danzig gets there very early. The Misfits is already done and dusted by the time Carnivore exists. And so by 86, we get the first Samhain record, November Coming Fire. Samhain is thought of as transitional, but Danzig spends at least 4 years on this project, and puts out a number of recordings. But November Coming Fire is the one sort of official full length. It to this day is an extremely hard to find record with an awesome cover. It's definitely it's sort of a secret handshake for people who really like Danzig. It's something that black metal people should be more aware of. And basically, coming off of Glenn's disillusion with the Misfits, he tried to create a band that would fuse everything he liked, and especially the darker sounds he had acquired more and more of a taste for, that pulled him away from the Only Brothers, who were still listening to the Ramones. So Samhain incorporates the aggressive hardcore of the later Misfits, but more so proper British goth, American death rock in the style of Christian Death. But really like The Killing Joke from England and Susie and the Banshees and things like that. Goth at its thorniest and weirdest in many ways, with the spikiest, most angular guitar riffs. And at the same time, his growing interest in slowed down metal and a feeling of crushing as opposed to ripping heaviness. And the doom metal aspect of Danzig starts to creep in here. Or the interest in, say, like, the slow Metallica songs. And, so this is a really cool band. This is one of the most... This band, Samhain, is very conceptual. It has a concept. It has an agenda. It is on paper, Samhain is the coolest band of all time. Does it succeed? Well, sometimes. I would say if even those of us who love Samhain, we have to be realistic that a lot of this is a properly experimental band. Danzig is trying things and sees what sticks to the wall, right? Throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. That's what I meant. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But on November Coming Fire, we do get a couple tracks where it really works, and one track in particular that just gloriously crystallizes it. This is... let's listen to Danzig's RAC song, Let the Day Begin.
Let the day begin. Let the horror start. Let the furious wail. Let the skies all cry. Let the day begin. Let the fun begin. Let the worlds collide. Let the day begin. Let humanity spin. Let the day begin. Inherent time is ahead. So let the day begin. No matter what to do life. So let the day begin. Let the world stand there. Let it stand on trial. Let it open up. Let the tides explode. Let the day begin. Let the Jews all scream. Let the Catholics burn. Let the Protestants hide. Let the lost ones follow in the road to mine. Let the fun begin. Let the worlds collide. Let the day begin. Let humanity spin. Let the day begin. Inherent time is ahead. So let the day begin. No matter what turn into love. So let the day begin. Inherent time is ahead. So let the day begin. No matter what turn into love. So let the day begin. Inherent time is ahead. So let the day begin. No matter what into life. So let the day begin. Let the earth stand straight. Let the sin and rape. Let us get there to you. Let us feel the pain. Let the gate to you. Let the day begin. Let the horror start. Let the furious wail. Let the skies all cry. Let the day begin. Every time is ahead. So let the day begin. No matter what into life. So let the day begin. And her time is ahead. So let the day begin. No matter what into love. So let the day begin.
You ever heard that one, man?
I mean, I can't recall if I have. It was a really long time ago. It is very good, though. And it's interesting. Now I know where The Offspring got a ton of stuff on their, like, very first independently released record. Yeah, it's like weird little like Phrygian phrases that are tucked in there. The Offspring ends up doing a lot with that, as well as just kind of the overall presentation. I mean, they had to be listening to this album like crazy.
The other Cali skate punk band that definitely were is AFI. I mean,
definitely.
You could take this song and some similar Misfits tracks from that, like the Misfits Halloween, and then Samhain on this record re-record Halloween with a heavier, more metallic sound. Mm-hmm. You could take this kind of the Samhain and certain melodic later Misfits songs, and you just get AFI's run from Total Immortal from All Hallows EP through Sing the Sorrow. I mean, this song has a lot of the sophisticated guitar stuff that they were doing on the last two records before they became, a completely different, terrible band. But basically, yes, you can hear that this anticipates a lot of stuff, and that although it's not a band that's well known, it's a band that a lot of people were taking very seriously. And you can hear in this song that Danzig completely achieves the fusion of the different influences. The verse is awesome, right? You've got this sort of chugging rhythm part that's like an Earth AD riff slowed down. Okay, that's like almost the Wolf's Blood riff or any of the other ones. And then you've got this sort of a reverby, arpeggiated goth guitar that's just sort of stitched around it like lace, right? Those little embellishments, those ding ding ding.
It's kind of interesting, the sort of like flanged out glassy guitar just being used almost like it's like a little sample or effect rather than like a riffing instrument, so to speak.
Yeah, it's texture, and like adds a little extra dimension to the melodies. It's not leading the riff for sure, but that's like it's like in this song he realizes, we can't let the Gothic guitar be the main guitar, but it can add something. Mm-hmm. He also like irons out some of the, like, a lot of the record has jarring harmonic contrast, or just harmonies that in themselves are kind of grating, because he's focused on these really dissonant passing tone stuff in goth, or trying to navigate between, say, a chromatic metal riff and something a little more melodic. Here, it's just really focused on the epic metallic Aeolian sound. Like, that's just the main, the core of the song is the progressions that we come to know and love in all sorts of extreme metal, outside of death metal, basically. And, so you get that verse, which is heavily gothy and has this kind of like restrained, there's a dynamics to it, right? The verse is a little restrained. And then, the chorus bursts out and has the sort of the gang vocals and is just like full on slashing, hardcore metal guitar, whatever. And then back to the verse. It's a really cool track. We have to talk about the lyrics, because you may have noticed that Danzig lists several religious creeds that are gonna get it when the devil comes back, and the first one he mentions is the one you're never supposed to mention. So we'll get into it a little more later, but Danzig has always had a black metal worldview in the fullest sense. And this track, in many ways, it couldn't have come out of second wave Norway, but it's almost like a Forgotten Woods song. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, Forgotten Woods, okay, they are Norwegian, but like, it couldn't have come out of the main second wave sound. Yeah. You know what I mean? It has the kind of weird 90s pagan BM markers. I mean, this is just like one of the, this might, push comes to shove, this might be my favorite song by Danzig, right? This is up there. This is awesome.
Yeah, no, it's very good.
Yeah, so, but it is important to point out that your mileage may vary with the rest of the record. And it's well worth listening to, but especially if you're interested in songwriting and where it goes right and where it goes wrong. And you know who else was very interested in Danzig's songwriting and where it goes right and where it goes wrong?
Mr.
His
Steele.
student, Mr. Steele. Yes.
Yeah. So 1991 comes around. Type O negative, after Carnivore wraps up, there's a period of a few years where not a lot is going on in the Peter Steele camp. But then Type O negative fires up in 1989. They play around with a few different names. Hilariously, they settle on the name Sub-Zero, and everybody gets tattoos of a logo for that, of the minus sign encircled by a zero, after which they find out that there is another band with that name, and they need to come up with a new name that will still fit the tattoo that they've all got.
Isn't there also a guy in a video game that was extremely popular in the early 90s?
Yeah, but I think... I'm not sure what the timing on that would be, but it's one of my favorite like metal lore stories that it's like you get a, and of course they end up
you get the tattoo right, and then you have to change the name.
Yeah, and then you have to and you like try to make it work, and then of course you end up with like one of the coolest names ever for a metal band.
That's a very good point, right? Talk about like embracing fate.
Oh yeah, it's so good. So 1990.
And is that literally the sign for the Type O negative blood type?
I mean, it's not like I mean, it wouldn't be the negative in the O. It would be next to it, but it's like you get the idea immediately.
Yeah. I see. I had no idea. That's a good fact.
So basically, Peter Steele, along with Josh Silver. Josh Silver was in Fallout, which was this, like, brief thing where Peter and Josh were in Fallout briefly in the late 70s, early 90s. I think they were more of a glam-type band. They just put out, like, a single in 81 and then folded pretty quickly after that, and then Carnivore sprung from those ashes. The main duo... Peter Steele's right-hand man throughout his career is Josh Silver. They're apart for a little bit. Josh Silver isn't involved in Carnivore, but then he comes back for Repulsion, which is an earlier incarnation of Type O negative. 91 rolls around. It's time for Type O negative's first record, Slow, Deep, and Hard, on Road Racer Records, the prior name of Roadrunner Records, back when they were a label that anyone gave a shit about. Slow, Deep, and Hard is an incredibly weird album. This is probably Peter Steele's single most experimental work, which is kind of impressive given that, like, despite how we think of him as a very, like, established artist, he's always playing around with sort of novel combinations of ideas you wouldn't think of. And it's especially intense on Slow, Deep, and Hard. This is a record that is... I would say that it's, like, extremely well lauded in the metal scene more for the idea of it than the execution, because, like the Samhain record, it can be extremely clumsy a lot of the time. Peter Steele is sort of, like, trying to negotiate a path out of hardcore.
He finds himself at the same point Danzig did.
Yes, he is trying to remove the last traces of kind of punk and hardcore influence, but it actually remains here on Slow, Deep, and Hard, and there's even bits of it on Bloody Kisses, the next album, where they really blow up as a goth band. So here on Slow, Deep, and Hard, we see Peter Steele trying to figure out what he's going to do for the rest of his career. Now that he's got a solid lineup and he's got an aesthetic defined that seems maybe not more personal to him, but like one with more legs to it. It's like Carnivore, it's like nukes, and it's nukes and rape and being a bad guy. And that's kind of like what it's about. Now, let me tell you right now, best aesthetic possible for that's what metal bands should be about. But
it's universal, not personal.
Yes.
We can all agree on a few things.
Yeah, it's mostly those. So Type O Negative is an aesthetic that is a little bit more expansive. You can have kind of softer and harder edges to it. It just felt like, I think, to Peter Steele, like a more wide open space that he could play in, rather than the relatively narrow focus of something like Carnivore. But he is still negotiating his way out of hardcore, which means that there is stuff on Slow, Deep, and Hard, and as I said, Bloody Kisses, that is straight in the Carnivore wheelhouse. So, I kind of stepped on you there. I just decided to jump in and like give you a break for a little bit. You're the one who actually put this sample here. Do you have anything you want to comment on before you?
No, man, that was great. I mean,
okay, cool.
Like, I would rather like, yeah. I mean, the Type O's your babies, so I mean, I think it fit there. You said everything I would have wanted to say about that. Basically, okay. So to return to the overarching narrative, I mean, you've already made the connections pretty clear. But yeah, it's You can just see that once again Steele is paying attention to Danzig and saying, okay, it's like, who knows if he ever literally said this to himself, but it's like, okay, I'm gonna do a Samhain type record now. And by 91, he would have known that those Samhain recordings are a mixed bag at best. You know what I mean? Like, Pete Steele wasn't deaf, right? So he would have known, like, okay, the cool thing about Samhain is that Danzig was extremely uninhibited and maybe less concerned about sort of, less of a perfectionist than at any other time in his career, right? So Pete Steele was like, fuck it, let's do it. I mean, you also know the lore about, I assume you know better than me, the lore about Slow, Deep, and Hard. It was recorded in a way that's actually kind of like, it embodies the throw it at a wall and see what sticks method. Didn't he write all the parts in a night?
Okay, so that is what it says on Metal Archives, and I have heard that said before. The thing is, Peter Steele lied fucking constantly in interviews.
Interesting.
Peter Steele loved to fuck with people interviewing him who were shockingly credulous about a lot of the things they said. If you go digging,
because he is so handsome.
I think that
You're
it's
like, wow, Pete, tell me more.
Well, Pete had like an extremely dry sense of humor, especially in interviews. So I think there's a lot of stuff that he said that was like obviously a joke to him, but was just taken without even a hint of salt by any of the people talking to him. Now I could see maybe the lyrics being written in a single night, but I do not believe that the entire record was written in 4 hours.
I could believe that he already had the riffs and a lot of the ideas, but that the songs themselves were assembled in one night, which leads me into this sample. These songs are, if the Samhain record is kind of different parts stitched together with varying degrees of success, right? There's a real effort made to integrate those parts, which sometimes causes problems because you just can't. The Type O Negative record is gloriously incoherent.
Oh, it's just parts next to parts.
Slow, Deep, and Hard is totally... He's like, I understand that I'm not this is bad songwriting. But it's bad songwriting embraced as a method. Right? Where Danzig ends up with bad songwriting as an accident of attempting to make something as an accident of his R&D project, right? It's like Pete Steele is like, yeah, I'm going to write these and they're going to not make any sense and it's going to rule.
Yeah, it's like, it's like there's 7 songs on the track listing. There's 30 songs on this album, you know?
Yeah. You really can't, like, there's ways, like, the criticisms of this record are so obvious that I would say the problems with this record are so glaring that they limit what the record can be. This can never be the greatest Type O record. However, it also becomes impossible to criticize for those problems And anyone with a fucking, any red-blooded man who hears this is gonna fucking love it.
So let's listen to Zero Tolerance. Okay, maybe the album actually rules, you know?
well, yeah! I mean, that to me is... I really enjoyed listening to World Coming Down. It's a perfect record in my book. Lots of beautiful songs. I'm sorry, this is my favorite 3 minutes of Pete Steele's career.
It's yes.
Oh, you're gonna die!
He's having so much fun, you know?
Oh my god. Yeah, so this is what we mean by incoherence as a method. It is just a bunch of fucking parts. One damn thing after another. And the parts have almost been calculated to amuse in how they follow one another.
Yes. I think that there's like structural comedy occurring in a lot of these songs.
Yeah. It's hard to, like, you know, we could do a whole episode on how funny this song is, but basically, like at the beginning, the basic melodies for most of this sample, when this comes in, we're already several minutes into the track, and we've heard like prolonged, slow, keyboard-laced doom passages and things like that. And it starts coming out of one of those, and then suddenly we're back in like the primal DNA for both the Misfits and, I guess, in some way, Pete Steele, which is the Ramones, right? Pete Steele as a New York guy. The guitars are now like Ramones New York Dolls, like sort of like brash major key rock and roll. Rama-Lama power chord.
Yeah.
Early Misfits Rama-Lama power chord. We're in like 1-4-5. You know, you have the gang vocals over that, like, you know, you get the jungle toms and the gang vocals, and it's like a bunch of fucking, like, surfer bodybuilder beach bums just chanting.
I love that, like, sample shout they're doing.
Yes. I don't think it's a sample. I think it's his friends.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the same guys from fucking Origin of the Feces, the fake crowd there.
You have to remember, we are at the very beginning of gang vocal. Like, okay, the Misfits records have gang vocals in the sense that they have the whoa-whoa choruses, right, or Samhain, but, like, the true gang vocal of, like, all your drunk friends in a basement recording the track, we are at ground zero for that New York hardcore. Mm-hmm. So we have this sort of Ramonesy punk stuff, and then we're back into sort of Carnivore type thrash riffs, and then eventually, and then the song will at points break open into this kind of da 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 part, which is much more elegant and has these like gossamer Gothic metal synth parts over it, which hints so. And then at the end, we are suddenly back in Megatherion, right? We get just it's like a Celtic Frost riff or something.
Mm-hmm. And the grinding contrast there is completely deliberate. And actually, so. What I will say is this kind of structural incoherency does actually persist through Type O Negative's career, but in the sense that a lot of their epic-length tracks are really built as suites of, a few closely related but very distinct ideas. It's kind of awkward here on Slow, Deep, and Hard, but it gets smoothed out considerably as the discography continues.
Yeah, it becomes like an exercise in how can I navigate between these disparate parts, rather than like, haha, they're gonna love these disparate parts.
Yeah.
But you can hear how, I mean, I guess by the Samhain period, Danzig had deliberately rejected the Ramonesy stuff, but other than that, all the same influences are in the pot.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So here Steele is following Danzig's method of making an R&D album and trying to incorporate everything he likes. It's also clear that Pete Steele likes all the same things Danzig likes.
Yeah. And what we'll come to see that's so fascinating that really like made us sink our teeth into this is that Peter Steele likes all the same things Danzig likes, is influenced by all the same things, and the final products they end up producing musically sound radically different from one another.
Yeah, I mean, this sounds complete. This has all the same constituent parts as Let the Day Begin, and the song is totally different.
Yeah.
Let the Day Begin is like a compact, disciplined, like, 3-minute punk, like 3-minute hardcore or like RAC song. This is. How long is this fucking track?
Oh, God, it's like 7 minutes long or something?
Yeah, they do that for 8 minutes, 7:46. Yeah. Things just keep happening. And and it's part of a record that works scaled up, works in the same way. All of the lyrics are about Pete Steele getting over a breakup. Well, that's not fair. Pete Steele being cheated on by some dumb whore. All of the lyrics are him freaking out about that in and to the point where when I read you the lyrics to this song, you thought they were the lyrics to the first song, which is called Unsuccessfully Coping with the Natural Beauty of Infidelity, because they're all the same song, which is an album-length rant.
And this continues through the discography. There is at least one song that is about a cheating girlfriend on every single Type O Negative record.
Yes. Although Pete has always made a point of never concealing his vulnerability and his softer side and whatever. This is maybe this record is, I think, the most authentic presentation of that, because it is totally ugly and unvarnished and silly.
Yeah.
Like, the lyrics on this are so fucking unhinged. I mean, should I do you think they heard what the lyrics were to that part, or should I read them?
Oh, dude, read it.
Ahem. Oh, you're dead now! I put a pickaxe in the trunk of my car. I'll put it on the grinder to get it real sharp. There's an ugly green monster in my head. Won't leave me alone until you're dead. I called your house, but you couldn't be reached. So I took the D train to Brighton Beach. You're doing the thing with a brand new man. Checking out the stars, screwing on the sand. Kill you. Kill you. Punishment! Kill you. Took some steroids and adrenaline, Finlandia vodka and hallucinogens, mixed it with blood and orange juice, liquid protein and ice cubes. Staring down at your sweaty embraces, put my tool right through your faces. Well, buddy boy, I hope you enjoyed her, cause I'm an equal opportunity
destroyer.
Destroyer!
I got something to say, and I killed a baby today, and it doesn't matter much to me as long as it's there. But I got something to say, I raped your mother today, and it doesn't matter much to me as long as it's square. Sweet lovely death, I am waiting for your breath. One last go. One last caressing death. One last caressing death.
So, if in 1991 Peter Steele is responding to Samhain, that means inevitably that Danzig is on to the next arc of his career right at the same time.
Yes. So, the next arc of Danzig's career, which will become the next arc of Pete Steele's, is, it's hard to say this in a single catchy phrase, so Gothic metal with strong undertones of hard rock and other non-metallic genres. Which I think if you took that descriptor could apply to basically all the things Danzig and Pete Steele do after that.
Yeah.
It's, and as we will stress throughout, Danzig's take on this is a little more steeped in, Pete Steele's approach to this is more evidently linked to extreme metal, whereas Danzig is more linked to, the non-metal stuff, but there's plenty of non-metal stuff in Pete Steele's as well. So, basically, I guess to get here, I'll just go to the last notes I had for that last section, which is, if you were listening carefully to the last section, you might sort of say, are these records really that parallel? Because after all, Slow, Deep, and Hard is a Type O record, right? It's not part of a separate project. It's just the first Type O record, whereas Danzig had Samhain separated out as this separate R&D
Well,
band.
actually, you could make the argument that it does work because Slow, Deep, and Hard is basically the Repulsion demo. One of the names, yeah, so really the material was made, it was first issued in 1990, on that cassette. It was 6 of the 7 songs were represented on there. So while it ends up getting fully released and better known as a Type O negative record, you could make the argument, it's under a different name at least.
Yeah, okay, so that's a very good point. So, it may actually be a different band. B, it may as well be a different band because it sounds so different from the subsequent Type O recordings. And on the flip side of that, Samhain could almost have been the same band as Danzig, and sort of was. As with Repulsion into Type O, the late Samhain lineup and some of the songs transitioned directly into the new band, quote-unquote, new band Danzig, which was never really a solo project, but a full lineup band. And the side one of Final Descent by Samhain, which is either a second LP or collection or something, features guitarist, who would bring his style to the Hallmark Danzig sound, John Christ. So Samhain is more continuous with Danzig than it might appear, and Slow, Deep, and Hard is less continuous with the other Type O records than you might think. So, where is Danzig in the late 80s? By 88, the Samhain to Danzig metamorphosis is complete, and Danzig has pulled together an all-star lineup, and under the guidance of Rick Rubin, who also did Rain and Blood, produced the self-titled Danzig record, which from here on we will be referring to as Danzig 1. Because, of course, it stands in contrast to his, I guess, maybe his ultimate statement, 1990s Danzig 2, Lucifuge. So in the wake of that, Danzig self-titled obviously becomes Danzig 1. And then it's 3 more, and so then just after this period, right, is when we have 91, we get Slow, Deep, and Hard, when Samhain is still responding to, when Pete Steele is still responding to the sort of the Samhain era. But by 93, Type O Negative releases Bloody Kisses. This is a mature Type O Negative sound. By this point, Pete knows what he wants to do, and he has had time to totally process the influence of the next phase of Danzig. The Danzig 1 and 2 records. There is a close parallel, and we can show this with a sample from definitely the most radio played. I actually heard this song on the radio only once, but that's infinity more than any other Type O Negative song. We can play this with the hit single from Bloody Kisses, Black No. 1, Little Miss Scarall. We're going to start about 30 seconds in.
Now it's All Hallows Eve. The moon is full. Will she trick or treat? I'll bet she will. She's got a date at midnight with nose for round 2. Oh, baby, really monster, ain't got nothing on you. Well,
It's, I still think it's very charming.
Oh yeah, it's a great song. And it's the closest thing you can get to hearing another Danzig on the radio.
Yeah, no, this one is very
like
directly.
I heard it as a teenager, and I was like, I can't believe there is another Danzig. Like, in some sense, I didn't go check it out more. Sort of like, I liked it, but I also was like, well, I already have one of these at home. I guess I was surprised that you could hear something that was so close to an iconic sound as a completely different thing. You gotta do a double take. I mean, the vocals on this Pete Steele's vocals are actually quite distinct from Danzig's. He sings in a somewhat higher range with a lot more melisma. This track, he is hanging out in baritone to bass as much as possible. It has that greasy blues riffing. Dum 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 dum. Sort of blues, primordial hard rock, and garage punk. It has the snaky turnaround. That's like a John Christ guitar thing.
Oh yeah, that's very Danzig.
Yeah, and you even look in the video, and it's fucking Pete. Pete Steele has the complete Pete Steele look, which is Danzig. Now this dovetails with something else that we know about the song in an interesting way. It is widely understood that this song is a parody, or that it's satire. It was written to poke fun at, I guess you could say, aspects of goth culture that were already cliche, that the band also enjoyed.
Oh yeah, it's a very affectionate parody. Are we gonna say that the guys in Type O Negative don't love goth bitches? Come on now.
Yeah, exactly. The funny thing is, if you played that scene of them playing the acoustic instruments with the vampire-looking goth bitches dancing around them, now, if those are part of a modern band video, we'd be like, this is such Zoomer cringe. Right? It has that quality that the Carnivore records did of having self-awareness but being done in earnest. But even more so than some other Type O songs, this really is having a bit of fun. And the lyrics, if you listen to them, are they're about the most cliche goth chick of all time.
Yeah.
But they're also the most cliche lyrics about a goth chick of all time.
Yes.
And that's where this song becomes a parody. It's a parody of a musical style, and the musical style is Danzig's. And this is a really good example of that relationship of the student to the master. Because parody it's really satire that is the aggressive thing, right? You're mocking or making fun of something, right? It comes from, like, the phrase has something to do with it's like the satyr play, the goat play. It's related to Dionysus and, like, laceration and pulling things apart, right? Parody is more of a formal procedure that doesn't have to be aggressive or at something's expense. And parody is about exaggerating the conventions of a style in ways that sort of show their limitation. Also maybe suggest things that are, you exaggerate the conventions so much that those conventions become visible. You see how the thing works, and you realize that it could be done differently. And it didn't have to be done that way, and that dissonance is funny. You see how a certain kind of culture moves down a very predictable set of tracks, and and you see the dissonance between... Yeah, you can also sort of expose tensions within, or ironies within the style itself, in the form itself. And so it's about exaggerating stylistic conventions, and that requires intense awareness of those conventions. To parody something, you really have to understand how it works. And to understand how it works, it helps to like it. So this song is parody, and it's a joke, but it's also an homage. And I think it's also like a little bit, to use another stupid French word, it's also an etude. It's a little bit like Pete Steele and Type O Negative are practicing Danzig. Like, we're going to internalize this style by parodying it, and then it's just going to be ours, and we take it in whatever direction we want.
Yeah. I think that... I think this is a continuous thing with Peter Steele throughout his career, which is why there's such, like, sort of strange writing about him and what kind of guy he was, and an odd kind of hand-wringing over whether things were supposed to be silly or if they were supposed to be serious, when I think the answer pretty much consistently is it's supposed to be both at once, all the time.
For sure. And so it would be wrong to say that this is him taking shots at Danzig, but it definitely is him having a little bit of fun with that. Yeah. It shows the imprint of the master's work while also being quite irreverent about the master. It shows that sense that, like, Pete Steele isn't merely hero worshipping Danzig. He understands him, the Danzig persona, and the Danzig artistic legacy as things outside him that he can interact with, and that he doesn't have to be beholden to. But it's also not a typical Oedipal reaction. Everything about this video that suggests he thinks the Danzig goth rocker image is everything about this that suggests the sort of the inherent silliness of being a Danzig style goth rocker in the early 90s also indicates that Pete Steele loves it.
Yeah.
And so it is both, it's irreverent and profoundly respectful. And, you know, it's a case of, like, people say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Well, someone who loves your work enough to parody it, that's real flattery.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely.
So, it's, that is a, you know, I think this track really, and I haven't seen anyone, like, people say, oh yeah, it's making fun of, like, stereotypical goth rock of the time. I'm not sure I've ever, maybe somebody has before, but I'm not sure I've ever seen someone specifically point out that this seems to be in dialogue with one guy, and one style of music. However, or one guy and his music. Mm-hmm. However, we should point out that there is also plenty of Pete's approach even here. So, I mean, obviously the funny lyrics are typical of him, but more than that, like, in the way the song works, where Danzig is deliberately pared back, here the arrangement is dense.
Yeah.
Right? You pointed out the funny hammer horror organ.
Yes, that annoying little, like, 3-note loop that's echoing in the background during the verses. And, you know, this is another... So, one thing people forget about Black Number One is that you're used to hearing it on the radio or something. Yeah, you're hearing the radio edit that's, like, 4 minutes long. Black Number One is 11 minutes long.
Wait, really? I thought it was deliberately 4 minutes as a parody of the kind of condensed rock and roll Danzig form.
That's the edit. When you listen to the album version, it's an epic length Type O Negative track that is, again, built like a suite with something like 3 different distinct parts to it.
You got to give the goth chicks some room to dance around, right?
Yeah, no, that's the thing. It's like the first... So what you have in, like, the radio edit is the opening of the track and the closing, the Lovin' You's Like Lovin' the Dead part, but there's, like, a ton of instrumental stuff in the middle that is really cool and elaborate. That's that maybe there's another distinction, is that typo negative stuff, apart from merely being long form, is oriented around jammy, almost proggy stuff that Danzig wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole.
Yes, we will get into that on the album reviews. There's a very different sense of musical value there about economy versus expansion. And also, I think, a sense of where the center of the music is. One thing that links the Danzig records more to rock music and garage punk and whatnot is that they are vocal focused. I would say there's amazing musicianship on those albums. However, there's no question that it's about Danzig's vocals. Danzig can play music. He wrote the riffs in Earth AD. That was not the only twins, or only brothers. He writes, the progressions and a lot of the guitar lines in the Danzig songs. But he doesn't play on stage. Pete Steele plays bass. Right? Pete Steele is a he's a Lemmy or Kronos type musician. Or Phil Lynott. The sort of the charismatic vocalist bassist. And Pete Steele writes in a way that gives a lot more room to breathe to instrumental stuff and also, at the same time, to riffs.
Yes.
Danzig stuff has riffs, but Pete Steele's stuff allows the riff to get the value in itself that it has in extreme metal, and also, by doing that, then, to, like, open up into very long, elaborate melodies. Like in that instrumental stuff you're talking about. Yeah,
Danzig has very distinct riffs, but it's still ultimately like vocally centered music.
Yeah, he in fact, we've always talked about how it's hard for bands in that sort of true heavy metal vein to actually balance the riffs with the vocals. I think one reason I love those Danzig records is that they have both and they fit perfectly together. But that's because it goes with the very minimalist riffing.
Yes. Yes.
So, and we can also see a character difference here where, Danzig wants to have a sick band and he values their musicianship, but Pete will just be like, yeah, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Take it away.
Yeah. Take him for a walk, Johnny.
Yeah, I'm going to play some bass for a while. So there's some differences, but there's also, a thing I wanted to point out, not just the arrangement, but something about the pacing. So I was saying slow burn. Now I realize that on the full track, the pacing is even more slow burn. But there's a sense of continuity and seamlessness in Type O songs. And it takes us quite a while to get to get through the verse stuff to the chorus here, and there's actually a fake chorus. They do that. They go from the blues riff to the ba 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 ba.
Yeah, you can't go out because your roots are showing,
right,
etc.
And that's like what they do in Living on a Prayer or something. That's a pre-chorus so good you think it's the chorus.
I love a good pre-chorus.
Yeah, it's the fake-out pre-chorus. Here, it's almost written like Nirvana, I would say, more than Danzig. Like the riff.
I think that's true. Yeah. Well, yeah. It's also this one also has very straight. You actually don't get the most distinct riffing moments on this song in the edit. No. Yeah, like a lot of that's you get it at the end. That "Loving You is like Loving the Dead" is just a fucking great section with a really cool, just like swaggering rock riff. But there's a lot of great riffing in the middle of that song that's excised from the edit. And the other thing that I think is important to keep in mind is like. Getting back to the idea of, tribute versus parody, as you kind of pointed out, this is very deliberately in response to Danzig, both in where it matches up and where it diverges. I think Peter Steele was a very smart guy. And he was a guy who took music very seriously, and I don't think it's a stretch to say that he was applying like a pretty analytical mind to it, like making conscious decisions, not merely letting influence be this purely organic, intuitive, kind of fluffy process, but something that he actually worked on.
Yeah, it's a method. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's intentional. I mean, intention is always a tricky word in art, but like since we're talking about what Pete the artist is doing, there's an intention behind. He is deliberate might be a better word. He is deliberate in how he negotiates these things and responds to them, and you can hear it. Yeah.
So that's in 93. I did a little bit of research, and it seems like Type O Negative and Danzig actually did tour together, as far as I can tell, just once, the following year in 94. After...
I didn't know it was that early. Yeah.
So Danzig was touring on Danzig 4, and Type O was touring on Bloody Kisses. I saw some reports that say that the shows were fucking awesome. I've seen... What's fascinating is how little information I can find on Peter Steele and Danzig coming into contact with one another.
Well, buddy, I actually just got a little bit of hearsay about that. This is pure YouTube comments, so take with grain of salt. I haven't had time to source it yet. Sorry. So, take this for what it's worth, but I heard something to the effect that when Steele toured with Danzig, somebody asked Steele about what it was like being around Danzig, and specifically there was a rumor that on the tour you weren't allowed to look Danzig in the eye. and that Steele said something to the effect of, well, if I wanted to look him in the eye, I'd have to get down on my knees, and I'm not going to do that.
That's pretty good.
So, did that happen or not? I don't know. There's actually, as we'll get into at some point, maybe on a post-episode stream. There is a vocal contingent of Danzig haters who, and I think for everything that's true about the Danzig height to ego ratio and the forms of outrageously egotistical behavior it seems to produce in him sometimes. Right? Danzig has, definitely had some moments. It's as much as that's true, I do. Part of me is like, did that actually happen? But it totally could have, and it would have been in character too, right? I mean, we know that Danzig is, at minimum, very difficult to deal with on tour, right? Mm-hmm. Some of this stuff might be blown up, out of proportion, misrepresented. Some of its stuff clearly isn't, right? The French onion soup episode, or whatever, is pretty bad. So he is, at minimum, an artiste and maybe a bit of a sort of a rock star on tour who's very demanding. So I wouldn't be surprised if something kind of like that did happen, and if Pete called it like it was, right? He's not going to let his reverence for the work of Danzig the artist get in the way of being really fucking annoyed by Danzig the guy.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Speaking of their personal careers and entanglements,
certainly.
You gotta tell us about the piece of spicy literature that gives this episode its name.
Ladies and gentlemen, who is the sexiest rocker of '95? I think that's it's a decision we all have to make for ourselves. That's how you know you've You've become an adult is when you're able to answer that question for yourself. But, the title of this episode, The Sexiest Rockers of 95, comes from the 1995 issue of Playgirl that covered just such a competition, I suppose. Playgirl elected Peter Steele, the sexiest rocker of 95, with a full photo shoot inside of legendary proportions, and he also emblazons the cover. But amongst the other rockers cataloged inside with some brief interviews and some pictorial content, though unfortunately we don't get to see Danzig's hog in his case, Danzig is featured in those pages as another competitor for the sexiest rocker of 95, which was just so fascinating. I, of course, knew about the legendary Peter Steele photo shoot. I like to look it up on my phone in bed. But I was totally unaware until I saw a scan of the whole magazine that Danzig was also featured. So as soon as I saw that, it's like, well, actually, no, it was you that came up. It's like, that has to be the title. Sexiest Rockers of 95.
Yeah, man, that's just so cool.
That's
I'm
hilarious.
Sure, I bet somebody told Danzig he was in that episode and that he wasn't the centerfold, and Danzig said, I don't care about that gay shit. And that was like the end of that was the complete end of the conversation, and he never talked about or acknowledged it again.
Speaking of, I don't care about that gay shit. Bit of apocrypha. I don't know how accurate it is, but the story goes that Peter Steele was legitimately under the impression when he agreed to the photo shoot that Playgirl's audience was primarily female, and he was quite distressed when he figured out that nearly everyone who looked at him was a gay man or a metalhead with autism. So also,
well, I was gonna say nearly everyone who looked at was a man, because who's still looking at it today? Well, you gotta looking at the rod pics with the homies. Yeah.
Over the past 20 years, those pictures have been seen by drunk metalheads infinitely more than anyone with any sexual intent for them.
Yeah.
Oh man. So
yeah.
So beyond that, sort of like we're gonna get into more immediate musical comparisons in part 2 when we do our album reviews, but it is fascinating the other entanglements that we see. So after Peter Steele passed away in 2010, Type O Negative ended pretty much summarily when that happened, but things continued.
A rare decent move in the prominent metal band scene.
Absolutely. So, but the musical entanglements kind of actually occurred both before and after Peter Steele's untimely passing. Kenny, guitarist for the Type O Negative is one of those rare bands that had almost an entirely consistent lineup throughout their career, only swapping drummers in 1994.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah, I mean it always produces great shit. So Kenny briefly played with Danzig in 2006 and 2007, and then the longest running drummer for Type O Negative, Johnny Kelly, who joined in 1994, also ended up getting with Danzig. I think doing tour work variously, but then in 2010 became the full-time drummer for Danzig's band, and I believe he still is today. Let me confirm that. Yes, he is still the active drummer of Danzig.
Cool. All right, well, apparently they can work with Danzig.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really...
He can't be what if Pete Steele's band can work with him, he can't quite be the thing he's been made out to be by the anti-Danzig media.
Yeah. So I've always found that I find it very interesting that these bands were so similar to each other in so many ways, but seemed like relatively socially far apart from each other. It's only much later on that the intersection between those two musically becomes fully realized.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. Yeah, I guess it's kind of like what you know what? It's like Ancient Warriors. It's like it's a, like Olaf, our Thane is dead. Where do we turn our banner? Right? You have to like, well, we could I guess we're gonna have to pledge our swords to Danzig. Right? You go. It's kind of like who's the next of kin. Who's fighting the same fight? Without Pete, where do we turn? We turn back to Danzig. That's very cool to know. And I had no idea. So, the other place where Danzig and Pete Steele converge, and where Danzig, I think, serves as a model for Pete Steele, is politics, and maybe more broadly than that, worldview, informing politics. Both figures are at least implicitly right-wing in scenes where that was far from the norm. Whether we're talking about the American hardcore scene of the 80s, which was, certainly more right-wing than it's been made out to be retrospectively.
Yes, politically much more complicated than a lot of
much more complicated. But, there still is a reason that the current consensus narrative exists, right? It was that, and... Steele, of course, the primary milieu he was in like, more mainstream heavy metal and Gothic rock, which again, like, I mean, there's certainly your Panteras and whatnot, but it was hardly a it was hardly the charged hard right atmosphere of the metal underground, right? Both of them existed in these ecosystems where they were somewhat fish out of water. I think Steele, as we'll get into, was a bit more explicit about this than Danzig. In fact, you may not have even known this about Danzig, but I bet, I'm talking to the listener now, but like, I bet as soon as I said it, you were like, oh, wait, right. Obviously by right wing, we don't mean Republican. So for Danzig, I would say his engagement on this level is mostly sort of philosophical and aesthetic, right? It comes across in his worldview. Stray remarks, lyrics, like the ones we heard on Let the Day Begin, and sort of these aesthetic cues and reference points. But that's also not the whole story. So in the 80s, the Misfits had a reputation as, of all the major American hardcore bands, they were the ones who were okay with right-wing skins at their shows. I think there were all kinds of there's a whole skinhead spectrum, of course, especially in the 80s. They were all at Misfits shows, sometimes getting in brutal fights. But the point is, the Misfits did not discourage the various kinds of nationalist skins from showing up, and seemed to, in fact, kind of revel in it. For this lore, I mean, like we said up front, we really are drawing on lore, but as far as a citation here, I think I'm going off American Hardcore, which is an excellent book. That's one of those sort of like canonical works of music journalism that you could easily be like, well, this isn't like, this is something that normal people talk about, so I'm not going to read it. It's really fucking good. Like, I found that book much later than I should have, and probably spent way more time on the toilet than I needed to, because I needed to finish it. You know what I mean? like I was, American Hardcore is some of the most compelling toilet reading of all time. It's very good journalism, and very, although it's from the perspective of the nowadays hardcore scene and its values as it has emerged, as those values have emerged and consolidated, it's very honest about what the scene was like in the 80s. So the Misfits had this reputation as the the non-PC hardcore band. And that just, once you think about that, that completely makes sense with the lyrics, especially in the lyrics and the aesthetics, especially in the later Misfits. Think about the Wolf's Blood track we played, right? That later Misfit stuff, it's not about, like, schlock horror shtick. The horror tropes are ways of getting at one thing, which is simply destruction. It's just about, like, you know, dominating destructive force. And where other hardcore bands had this typical sort of punk rock narrative of counter power, power against power, the motto of the Misfits could just be the power, right? It's not fight the power, it's be the power. Mm-hmm. Be the creator demon guy on the pile of skulls, right? That fucking image is, the pleasure to kill cover is very Misfits.
Yeah.
So, you know, but being the power might bring you in conflict with the sort of prevailing, the prevailing norms of, you know, lily-livered Christian conservative moralists, but it's also going to bring you in conflict with the other kind of lily-livered Christian moralists, which are PC commie punks. And I think that's a thing that, as much as he didn't get along with the Only Brothers, I think that's a thing they all had in common. Those guys were kind of like suburban jock bros, which put them at odds with Danzig, who was this intense, brooding, sort of like committed underground artiste. But I think the Only Brothers just were always Republicans. They're
the Hodge twins or something.
Yeah. The Hodge twins of hardcore. Yeah, it's this kind of they're giving away a car. The Only Brothers basically weren't quite on the same trip as Glenn, but they definitely weren't on the same trip as other punks, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And you can see hints of this all the time in Danzig manifestations. Like, there's that classic series of sort of like sort of like art interviews with him. They're clearly scripted, but not scripted. They're planned, and not in a bad way, right? Just like a band can have like a set of like cool video segments that they plan to present their image to the public, right?
Yeah,
Deth in June does this.
Fine.
Deth in June behind the mask or whatever. This isn't like supposed to be quote unquote authentic and off the cuff. So there's those black and white interviews with Danzig where it's like the journalist speaks to Glenn Danzig in his study, and Danzig is there like as a man of culture, you know, sort of like doing a bodybuilder posture in front of his books, right? And you know, the interviewer will be like, "What do you think about violence?" Like, violence? Well, I don't have a problem with it. You know, he'll give these kind of replies that indicate that he sees the world as he sees conflict as an essential part of the world rather than an unfortunate necessity. Mm-hmm. And as one of the good things as a thing that can be affirmed and embraced. He styles himself not as a scruffy underdog, but as an aristocratic overlord, right? Not what, you know, but as somebody who has, through great effort, cultivated himself as that. Danzig never pretends he was just like, you know, he's not pretending he came out of his mama's womb like that. Danzig was, I think, of all of the guys that are reference points in all our culture, Danzig was one of the very first to be interested in modern bodybuilder self-improvement culture. You want, like, based werewolf bodybuilder? Glenn Danzig, number one. Literally number one. Songs about being a werewolf. Nerdy underground musician. Consciously seeks out hardcore shows that bring him into contact with physical violence all the time. Subjects himself to, you know, just crazy shit. And gradually decides that he needs to walk the walk, right? And, you know, he tries to walk the walk as much as he can. So he fucking bodybuilds, he learns Jeet Kune Do, we might laugh at the phrase Jeet Kune Do because it has the word Jeet in it, but and because it just sounds funny. But you know what that is, right?
Yeah, it's well, I mean, depending on where you're going, it can mean a lot of things. But the intent is like it's Bruce Lee's martial arts system derived from karate.
Right, which means that although we might see it as sort of outdated now, it was basically the first attempt at making a striking-oriented mixed martial arts system that wasn't bound by the dogmas of traditional martial arts.
Yeah.
So Jeet Kune Do was designed to help you. You know, you learned karate, but you also learned to, like, punch someone in the nuts and hit them with, like, a cue ball.
Yeah.
You know, it was meant to be a system for winning street fights. And it in that way it parallels other proto MMA stuff, like I guess in Japan, like Pancras or something, right? Where you have like a wrestling discipline that incorporates striking.
I'm not sure about that term. I was wondering if you were talking about pancration, like the old Greek wrestling. But no, so there were
but also jujitsu, right? I mean, early Gracie jujitsu was supposed to be wrestling, and you know, as the jujitsu practitioner, you know this better than me.
Yeah,
right? It was supposed to be wrestling that would help you win street fights.
Yeah, and there was also like Shoto stuff over in Japan. You know, like the shoot wrestling stuff that they were doing that was actually pretty seriously physical and had a lot of, you know, there was
that's Pancras is the word for that.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, Shotokan karate, I've heard of that too. We have a friend who does that. But,
there's Shotokan, and then there's Shoto, which is just like the Japanese word for shoot, which is sort of their version of catch wrestling and stuff like that.
Oh, I think we're talking about the same thing. Yeah, Pancras or Shoto. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we want to, like, if I can pivot for a second. So one of the distinctions here, you know, again, there's so many similarities between these two guys, but then there's major contrast, which is Danzig is interested in these ideologies in a kind of like metaphysical and philosophical sense that does interact with the world, but from a kind of top-down perspective. Peter Steele, on the other hand, is like almost monomaniacally focused on modernity and like immediate contact with the physical world. You know, Peter Steele never writes about abstract topics. It's always about events and people and things. It's extremely grounded in a way that Danzig isn't.
Danzig is deliberately never... I mean... Yeah, Danzig is deliberately one of the most impersonal artists ever. Mm-hmm. Which is why it's so easy to poke fun at the gaps between Danzig the man and Danzig the art. Pete Steele is extremely personal.
Yes. And so you can also see that in how this sort of like, you know, broadly right-wing ideology presents itself, where Danzig presents kind of these Nietzschean ideas, maybe a little bit of almost like LaVeyan Satanist, you know, do what thou wilt type stuff, kind of like libertine philosophy. Pete Steele is just a fucking asshole in a very direct, confrontational, deliberately obnoxious way that's designed to tease out the absurdities of Enlightenment values, and as he would
from the perspective of the hard living man on the street.
Exactly, as he would probably phrase it back in this era, you know, railing against political correctness.
Yeah. So okay. Yeah. The last link the last thing. Sorry, just to go.
You're good. You're good.
You jumped the gun. What you said was right, but I want to just return to the last point I had on the script, which is, basically, like, you can see that Danzig probably talks about Nietzsche in that black and white interview. Mm-hmm. I'm sure he does. It's clear that it's an influence. Also, sort of like, Miltonian, the romantic cult of Milton's Satan is big for him. You can tell that Danzig has like read Paradise Lost very seriously. like Wagner and shit, right? As you say, these are good examples of what you're talking about. He's always engaging with it on this lofty plane, and when it comes into his music, it's still on that lofty plane. But the other thing that you could say is Danzig is very influenced by Conan. Like when we talk about Danzig putting on a heroic mask, his heroic mask kind of just is dark Conan.
Yeah.
The Danzig character is Conan the Barbarian as like the devil's son. Or something like that. You could call it the ideology just Conanism. And another Conanist is Pete Steele. Right? The early Carnivore stuff shows it. So there is a lot of... And the Nietzsche influence, again, Pete Steele, I think, in the end, is not exactly a real... not like he's engaging with Nietzsche in the same way that he's engaging with Nietzsche, but he's not a Nietzschean. In the same way that he engages with Danzig, but is not Danzig. However, early Pete Steele especially shows that stamp of like will to power philosophy, and you get like Type O does the song Der Untermensch, which is obviously referencing Nietzsche, probably also referencing another guy with a mustache, but there's a lot of common DNA there, but being expressed in different ways. I guess we were talking about this in the break. Like, we both have a feeling Pete Steele was reading exactly the same stuff as Danzig, and probably much more explicitly political material than Danzig ever really read. But it comes through in his songs in this very direct, personal, grounded way. As the contrarian opinions of a guy who has to wait in line to drop off garbage from his truck. Like, I mean, he was a garbage truck driver for a while.
I think he was, like, largely throughout Type O Negative's career, to my knowledge.
So here's his other Conanist thing, and his other, like, early sort of bodybuilder Chad thing, right? Is like Danzig... all the music we both like plenty of music that actually isn't very masculine, but like, you like emo, I like the Cure, but like, the stuff we talk about on this show generally has that slant, but Discharge weren't making music about being men, they just were extremely manly.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, even Slayer weren't making music about being men. They were just masculine. They just happened to have an affinity for Hellgoats. Whereas Danzig is interested in masculinity in that same way as, like, Nerd becoming an Ubermensch is. Pete Steele is also interested in masculinity, and in kind of the way that, like, the embattled everyman is. Mm-hmm. Both of them are self-conscious about it. Pete Steele's like, man, sitting down at the bar, man, it just seems to me that nobody's okay with you being a man anymore. We got all these feminazis here telling me what I can and can't say.
How's this for a distinction? Danzig is interested in masculinity, and Peter Steele is interested in manhood.
I don't think that's fair. I think that makes Pete Steele sound cooler, which I think is wrong.
No, I mean more like Danzig is more interested in sort of the idea of what it means to be a man, and then Peter Steele is interested in this like very practical, fleshy application of it.
Disagree, because you've accidentally read what's in the notes in Carnivore, or in... Is this a Carnivore or Type O? I think it's Carnivore. In Male Supremacy, he says, between my legs, I've got what it takes to be called a man. Right? The classic thing is show it, don't say it. But they're both saying it. Mm-hmm, and I think they're getting to that. They're getting to that. Like, Danzig has songs where it's just like, my sexual potency is infinite. Right? That's like you can translate any number of Danzig lyrics as that. Right? And, Pete Steele just says, that's what I mean, is something like, I don't know, Morbid Angel is massive. Morbid Angel shows it, they don't tell it. Mm-hmm. Both of these guys tell it insistently, And you can see that maybe they do get there in different directions, right? Danzig from this scholarly way, and Pete Steele in this kind of like, what's the deal, you fucking bitch way, right? But both of them have been both of them are self-conscious about it, and are foregrounding. Both of them perceive it as a thing that is now becoming not okay. But I think that for both of them, it's kind of like, and especially for Steele, it's kind of like, I shouldn't have to say that this is cool, but I guess somebody has to tell you this is cool. Mm-hmm. So I'm that guy. By the way, did you know it's okay to have a 9-inch turbo dong and, run through every bitch in Brooklyn? And, so... Yeah, and so that's a difference. I mean, in general, is that the Danzig stuff all mostly has to be inferred from what he's doing, whereas Pete, as you're saying, lays it out on the table. Mm-hmm. Maybe literally.
They never get old. No. So another thing. So you're more well versed in Danzig than I am. Does any of the weird racial dynamic stuff that happens in Carnivore and Type O Negative pop up in Danzig's work?
Well, first of all, we should quickly remind people the racial dynamic. I mean, in Pete Steele's work, it runs throughout. It's extremely consistent. Yeah. We have Carnivore does Race War. Well, they fucking do it again once they're a mainstream band on a major label with Kill All the White People. He never lets it go. He never actually apologizes. Der Untermensch is also takes some shots at the welfare enabled, that if you're at all familiar with working class and poor life in New York City, especially in the boroughs, you know who he's talking about, basically, right? And that has ruffled many feathers. He even did it in another context, which I'll get into. I'll tell you the 80s hardcore story in a sec. But so we know that Pete Steele was always kind of vocal about this. Mm-hmm. Pete Steele's music was, and we could unpack that more. Danzig never touches it directly, never directly. Danzig's music is interesting in that, like the Stooges, it comes out of a profound reverence for black music. Mm-hmm. Differently from the Stooges, Iggy really, we've talked about this before, Iggy's whole thing is, I respect this so much, I'm going to do my own version of it. There's no direct mimesis, no direct imitation of actual blues in the way that the blues rockers were doing. There's blues scales, that's about it. Yeah. It's, he's like, I am going to make the primordial reptile brain retard white boy anthems. This is, it's Furor Teutonicus in the suburbs, is the Stooges. So there's that thing of I respect this, but I also know who I am. And I am not ashamed of that. And I'm not in this Oedipal daddy worship of the blues. Danzig clearly knows the same things Iggy does, but he does way more direct imitation of the blues. Mm-hmm. That can lead to some of his most awkward musical moments, like the moment where, yeah, I'm a blues man. But I think even those songs, like The Wolf or whatever, especially on Lucifuge, they're really well done. And they're weirdly compelling because they are such direct imitations of the original thing. They sound more like Delta blues than any Led Zeppelin song. I think Danzig sees himself as going back to that source more authentically than the other hard rock bands did. That said, he has this thoroughgoing blues influence, but it's the whitest shit imaginable. His take on all this stuff, because it is rigid, disciplined, fast, sort of white knuckle or clenched jaw energized, aggressive. It is not relaxed in any way. Danzig's music is shot through by tension. That has nothing to do with the attitude of the original blues, which is a sort of relaxed confidence. It's an affect. It's a distinct affect of like white music, basically white aggressive music, extreme music is this sort of tension. Even the blues could get intense, of course, and like loud, and Danzig is drawing all that and trying to,
But it's not attacking, though.
No, it's not attacking, and it's having a good time, right? It can arrive at these peaks of intensity that are sort of like, ritual channeling, right? But Danzig is just, he's like, I like that peak of intensity. That's my whole band now. So Danzig, I think, it's not, however, I will say that did you know what happened? So all that said, did you know what happened in 2025 last year? Danzig's put out a t-shirt in the Verotic dark comic style for the band Danzig with the cartoon character Danzig scowling in front of a massive fucking Sonnenrad.
Okay, well, shit. All right.
Just a fucking Wavelsburg big boy. Just right there. And, he has always hung out with Marduk, and things like that. So, I think Danzig is pretty fucking, I think Danzig knows the score, basically. I guess both of these guys have this attitude where, I think this comes across especially in Pete Steele's music, where people always be like, there's so many of these people who think that what he did was tongue-in-cheek or kind of like neutral social commentary. There's so much Pete Steele cope, basically, like people who worship him but want to... you should also remind him what you told me in the interlude about the Pete Steele supplementary material.
The
flag.
Yeah. So So I'll just read the note off of the Metal Archives page for Typo Negative. Every album since October Rust is labeled as a product of Vinland on the back cover. Vinland is a fictional country which, according to Peter Steele, is the US and Canada merged into a single nation. The concept of Vinland was explained on the band's website. That is certainly not what Vinland is. That is
right.
That is not what that means. So I think this is what I think this is what gets people off track about Peter Steele ideologically. For some reason, they imagine that a person with certain kinds of right-wing views is necessarily this like po-faced ideologue, completely captured by I don't know, like
it's like your every interaction in real life is like the most unhinged thing you've ever written on 4chan.
Yes. Or now, definitely, I've had interactions with people like that in real life, and it's
yes, we all have, and we might see the same things in the news as them and say, hey, that's really stupid. But we don't get along with them generally.
Yeah, no, they're exhausting to be around.
There's something very tiresome about it. It's yeah.
So I think that Peter Steele was a guy who had certain
not just tiresome, sometimes genuinely corrosive. You're like, hey man.
I'm talking more about the annoying guys. I mean, there are obviously guys who just have like hideous, destructive fucking thoughts.
But basically, there's a spectrum of this stuff, basically, and yes, there are people. There are always people who fit that stereotype, but there is a kind of person who thinks that I assume that everyone who doesn't agree with me is a bad person. Because I don't think Pete Steele is a bad person, he couldn't have disagreed with me about anything real.
Yeah. But the other thing is that Pete Steele is a guy that was very comfortable with the things that he believed in. Probably,
yes.
And and had integrated them into his personality, where he just sort of saw that as how things were. He didn't, so he didn't feel a need to, proselytize any sort of political message. He was like, if you're there for it, you are, and if you're not, you're not, and that's fine. And yes, right-wing guys can have a sense of humor about things, even about themselves. Very difficult for a lot of people on r/RABM to believe, but yes, they are capable of telling jokes periodically.
I think also a simple thing that would stand of both, I think, Pete Steele and Danzig, but it's easier to see it in Steele, is... let's see, I had it, in my head just before we recorded this, and I wrote it down. It's basically you can be for... Pete Steele shows you can be for your own people without automatically being against everyone else.
Yeah.
Or really anyone else, right? He has a well-adjusted, positive sense of who he is and what his, order of identifications or loyalties is. That doesn't mean that he can't interface with the rest of the world and find things to value in all sorts of people. And Danzig kind of has that too, in that Danzig's music is very Teutonic, very aristocratic, very sort of engages with all these things we've said, very, very unashamed about who he is, and yet it's profoundly influenced by black music. And if you tried to tell Danzig, if you tried to go on some fucking DMU spurg out about the blues or early rock and roll to Danzig, he'd probably, he'd have a few choice words for you, right?
Are you talking shit about Chuck Berry to Danzig?
Exactly. Yeah, look out. So he's about to strike you with lightning. So the black satanic lightning that you can't see. So the it's Danzig also has this thing. I mean, yeah, you could say that both of these artists have an implicit pro-white posture, but it's not really construed as a this kind of zero-sum game. And that's good and smart and mature of them, and why they're cool. And, fucking Pete Steele's lifelong best collaborator was a Jewish guy, right?
Oh, yeah, Josh Silver.
Yeah.
Who, one thing that I want to say, that it really makes me reflect on the band, that Josh Silver had worked with Peter Steele for so long, and... after Peter Steele passed away, the other members went on to other musical endeavors, but Josh Silver bowed out of music entirely and became a paramedic, which I think really speaks to what that friendship meant to him.
Yes. This is a very noble thing to do.
Yeah. And he seems to be doing well, and I wish him all the best. It's just it's clear that his time creatively was done without his bro.
Yeah. And as you were saying, it seems like Type O was as much his baby as Pete's.
Yeah, I believe they were the two primary collaborators.
Yeah. So they had this complexity. The other thing, or complexity isn't the right word because it's not complex. It's actually very simple. They had I think both Steele and Danzig have a clear sense of who they are and their direction in the world, and an openness and interest in all sorts of other people and things. Mm-hmm. And that especially comes across in Steele, who, Danzig's a bit of a hermit, right? And, Danzig's a hermit. Steele is a man about town. And Steele is a product. Everything about Steele's attitudes makes sense when you think of him as inhabiting the much rougher, more adventurous Wild West New York of the 80s and 90s, even early 90s, right? Steele is a product of you know, I mean, you could say Pete Steele is New York's last white guy, and that's a type of person, right? Those type of people are still around. They're in the boroughs. But Peter Steele is a product of Eastern European immigrant culture in the working class fringes of New York City. Mm-hmm. And so that means, on the one hand, that he sees all around him conflict. And he has a very disillusioned street-level view of how those conflicts tend to break down. He also sees all sorts of unlikely alliances forming between different groups. And he also, and this is key, runs into people of all stripes, loves them, talks with them, learns from them, shoots the shit with them, befriends them, hangs out in bars with them at all times. Pete Steele has seen the entire world by the time he's 15 in, 80s New York. And he knows that he's part of it. And he is, he's not sort of closed off to other kinds of people. And so that can lead to these kinds of stupid coat posts about Pete Steele being like, well, I know Pete Steele was just the sort of gentlest, kindest soul, and he was always so gracious to me and my friends, and we're all sort of like queer and Latinx and whatever. It's like, yeah, Pete Steele didn't give a shit that you were queer and Latinx. Okay, to be fair, somebody who really cared about Pete Steele wouldn't use either of those words, but you know what I mean, right? Yeah, obviously Pete Steele had black friends. Shocker, he wasn't driven by resentment and ill will. He's one of, I think that is in some ways the most radical thing about him. And the thing that has really just Pete Steele's ultimate triumph in Deth is being extraordinarily likable.
Hey, my lady in black, now I see your back. Haven't seen you for a while. Kinda miss your dilly smile. On a winter night, on a winter night, on a wicked night, on a wicked night, on a winter night. On a winter night, on a wicked night, on a wicked night. Hey, my lady in death, have you come for my last breath? I never thought we were through. I bet you knew I knew it too. I never thought that we were through. I bet you knew that I knew